So as we go through the Four Noble Truths here in Life of the Buddha, we didn't quite finish up with the Noble Truth of suffering. And then he was talking about the 5 aggregates and the Buddha's definitions. We ended with perception and going into sankhara, and then the Noble Truth of the origin of suffering. And the way I'll do this is after each of these Noble Truths, I'll read from Luangpo Sumedho's Four Noble Truths. So we already read from the Noble Truth of suffering yesterday, so I'll just finish up this section, go through Noble Truth of the origin of suffering, and then get back into Luangpo Sumedho, talking about origin of suffering. Why does one say formations? That's sankharas. Why does one say formations? They form the formed. That is why they are called formations. What is the formed that they form? Material form as the state, essence of form, is the formed, compounded. They call it form, compound. Feeling as the state of feeling is the formed that they form. Perception as the state of perception is the form that they form. Perception, formations as the state of formations is the formed that they form. Consciousness as the state of consciousness is the formed that they form. So this paragraph, it's taking sankhara as knitting these things together, stitching these things together as a kind of conceiving the 5 khandhas. 3 kinds of formations. Formation of merit, so 3 kinds of sankhara. Formation of merit as action which ripens in pleasure. Formation of demerit as action which ripens in pain. And formation of imperturbability as action, namely meditation, which ripens in the formless states, which for as long as they last are unperturbed by perception of form, resistance, or difference. That's from Digha Nikaya 33. And I believe Digha Nikaya 33 is the one that's attributed to Venerable Sariputta, defining what is 1, what is 2, what is 3, and so on. 3 formations. In-breaths and out-breaths belong to a body. These are things bound up with a body. That is why they are a bodily formation. Having previously thought and explored, one breaks into speech. That is why thinking and exploring are a verbal formation. Perception and feeling belong to consciousness. These are things bound up with consciousness. That is why they are a mental formation. What are formations? They are 6 bodies of choice. Choice among visible forms, sounds, odors, flavors, tangibles, and mental objects. Choice I call action, or kamma. Any formations, whatever, that are affected by... Oh, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just saying, choice, I think in there is how he's translating Chaitanya.
Oh, maybe, yeah, because it's intention. Intention I call action, yeah, yeah. Yeah. 6 bodies of intention. Intention among visible forms, sounds. And he actually has a note there. So he'll probably reveal that it's Chaitanya. Yep, Chaitanya, usually translation as volition or will. Why does one say consciousness, vijnana? It cognizes, that is why it is called consciousness. Cognizes what? It cognizes, for example, the sour, bitter, pungent, sweet, alkaline, unalkaline, salty, and unsalty. What does that consciousness cognize? It cognizes, for example, that there is pleasure, that there is pain, that there is neither pain nor pleasure. There are these 6 bodies of consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. Consciousness is called after the conditions due to which it arises. When consciousness arises due to eye and forms, it is called eye consciousness. Due to ear and sounds, ear consciousness. Due to mind and ideas, mind consciousness. Feeling, perception, and consciousness are conjoined, not disjoined, and it is impossible to separate each from each in order to describe their different potentialities. For what one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one cognizes. By bare mind consciousness disjoined from the 5 sense faculties, the external base consisting of the infinitude of space can be known thus: infinite space. The base consisting of the infinitude of consciousness can be known thus: infinite consciousness. And the base consisting of nothingness can be known thus: there is nothing at all. A knowable idea is understood by the eye of understanding. Yeah.
Are these sutta passages that he's quoting?
These are sutta passages. Yeah, the previous one was Majjhima Nikaya 38. This is Majjhima Nikaya 43, this particular one. And then a lot of the ones where I didn't do the sutta passage, he's jumping around in the Samyutta Nikaya, probably in the Kanda Samyutta. They're all, it says Samyutta Nikaya 22. He's relying heavily on Samyutta Nikaya 22, which is probably the Kanda Samyutta. This one is, however, from Samyutta Nikaya 3593. Consciousness depends for its being upon a duality, the duality of in oneself and external bases for conduct. And then back to Samyutta Nikaya 22. Any consciousness whatever, whether past, future, or present, in oneself or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, that is affected by taints and provocative of clinging, that is called the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging. And then from Majjhima Nikaya 109, these 5 aggregates affected by clinging have desire for their root. The 4 great elements are the cause and condition for describing the form aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for describing the aggregates of feeling, perception, and formations. Name and form is the cause and condition for describing the consciousness aggregate. So that's also very important, that linking these different dependent origination steps with the 5 khandas, and so that the 4 great elements, earth, water, fire, and air, are the form aggregate. Contact, when we say contact, that's the cause and condition for describing the feeling, perception, and sankhara. So that's Vedana, Sanya, and Sankhara khandas, being contact. Name and form is the cause and condition for describing the consciousness aggregate. Whatever monks or Brahmins recollect their past life in its various modes, they all recollect the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, or one or another of them. And I think that's very profound as well, because you get the question a lot, like, well, who was reborn if the Buddha's saying he remembered his past lives? And so, but with the awakening, he's saying, well, any past life recollected, they all recollect the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. And so that's profound because it's not only pertaining to past lives, but it's pertaining to ourselves in the past as well, and identifying some sort of sense of self in the past, and yet it's just a recollection of the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, or one or another of them. Any questions before going on to or comments before going on to the truth of the origin of suffering, which isn't nearly as long as he went there? Yeah.
I have a question on the floor. The way that formulated, it seems like with the first few clusters, sankhara, vijnana, namarupa, it seems like you have more or less all the factors of dependent origination, or five khandhas kind of grouped in that cluster of three factors, and that's usually the section where the most kind of feedback is described, like in terms of like name and form, giving rise to consciousness, consciousness giving rise to name and form. But then after that little cluster of densely packed factors, it seems like it kind of teases those factors out in a linear way, kind of tapering off from that. And it's always struck me as kind of a peculiar formation. Like, why would it be formulated that way? Because it seems like almost redundant in a sense. But I don't know, do you think maybe that's a bit of a pedagogical tool for kind of just contemplating it from different angles? Or does it have some other kind of utility?
He was asking you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'd say it's a pedagogical tool because it's pointing out a way to relate to it, or to try to understand it, or try to get a feel for it, because it is all sort of tangled up, and one can approach it from different ways, and I mean it's a somewhat logical way, but essentially, I think it's to me anyway. The value in it is in that it is like a teaching tool for teaching ourselves. I mean, it is a teaching tool for teaching others, but it's a teaching tool for teaching ourselves first and foremost, and so that we can get a sense of say the nature of those conditions. Also, when I think it's interesting to look at the Buddha's teachings as a illustration of dependent origination in many, many, many forms, in that sometimes there's say a structure that is explicit in terms of the 12 links of dependent origination in their full-blown aspect. But then in reality, the vast majority of teachings are actually alluding to that causal process, or that conditioning process, because that's how how I would say, well, referring back to it, a good reflection back is to Asaji's teaching to Sariputta, that when Sariputta asks him, what does he teach, and then he teaches the cause and the way to the cessation of that cause. So that's its sort of condensed nugget form, and then say the full blown is the dependent origination in its forward and reverse orders, but then all through the teachings there's different elements of that process that are kind of pointed to and illustrated in various ways. But yeah, I would definitely say it's a teaching tool. Because that's also, I think, that like the Buddha really is not trying to come up with a metaphysical analysis of the world and human existence. He's trying to give us the tools to not suffer.
And kind of like when I say this is what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
This is what it means.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a shorthand.
It also might be worth noting, I think you pointed out this, and you just alluded to it, the fact that like maybe this 12 step that we have has gotten a lot of airplay, or airtime.
Yeah.
But if you look throughout both the Nidana Samyutta itself and other places, especially Samyutta and other places, you find these explicit dependent origination type lists or progressions, but they are different order. They play around with the different loops, and so even though we have this kind of 12-step linear thing, in fact, it really is extraordinarily linear throughout all the 12 steps.
Yeah, and I think what's probably more important is the principle of Abhayagiri than the kind of sequential nitty-gritty.
Okay. This next section is pretty short. So, truth of the origin of suffering. And again, you get the Buddha defining more of these terms in case we had any doubts about them. Here are the truth of the origin of suffering. Here are detailed definitions of the second noble truth. These 5, this is Majjhima Nikaya 109 again. These 5 aggregates affected by clinging have desire for their root. The clinging is neither the same as the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is it something apart from them. It is the desire and lust comprised in them that is the clinging there. And then Majjhima Nikaya 38, the simple formulation of Idappaccayata. That comes to be when there is this, that arises with the arising of this. And then you got a couple from Samyutta Nikaya 12, the Nidana Samyutta. What is aging? In the various orders of beings, it is any being's aging, old age, brokenness of teeth. So in case we had any doubt about what aging means. Brokenness of teeth, grayness of hair and wrinkledness, decline of life and weakening of sense faculties. What is death? In the various orders of beings, it is any being's passing away, dissolution, disappearance, dying, completion of time, dissolution of aggregates, laying down of the carcass. What is birth? In the various orders of beings, it is any being's birth, coming to birth, precipitation in a womb, generation, manifestation of aggregates, acquisition of bases for contact. What is being? Bhava. So he's moving backwards, dependent origination. 3 kinds of being are being in the mode of sensual desire, being in the mode of form, being in the mode of formless. So there's the triple realm again, the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless. What is clinging? There are 4 varieties of clinging. Clinging as the habit of sensual desire, clinging as the habit of wrong view, clinging as the habit of misapprehension of virtue and duty, and clinging as the habit of self-theories. So that's kind of a strange translation, but the first one, clinging as the habit of sensual desire, that's kam upadana. Clinging as the habit of wrong view, or clinging, I think it's more recently translated as clinging to views, is dit upadana. Clinging to the habit of misapprehension of virtue and duty, that's the sila bhattupadana, like sila bhatta paramasa. And then the next one, attavad upadana, clinging to a doctrine or a theory of self. What is craving? Tanha. There are 6 bodies of craving. Craving for visible forms, sounds, odors, flavors, tangibles, and ideas. What is feeling? There are 6 bodies of the 3 sorts of feeling. Feeling born of eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, of tongue contact, of body contact, and of mind contact. What is contact? There are 6 bodies of contact: eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact. What is the 6-fold base? It is the eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base, and mind base. What is name and form? What is called name comprises feeling, perception, choice or cetana, intention, contact, and attention. What is called form comprises the 4 great elements and any forms derived upon them by clinging. So this name and this form are what is called name and form. What is consciousness? There are 6 bodies of consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. What are formations? Sankhara. 3 formations are the bodily formation, the verbal formation, and mental formation. What is ignorance? It is nescience, so I think that means ignorance. It is nescience about suffering, about the origin of suffering, about the cessation of suffering, and about the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That was Samyutta Nikaya 12, Sutta 2. And then from 1243, dependent on eye and visible forms, eye consciousness arises. The coincidence of the 3 is contact, with contact as condition, feeling, with feeling as condition, craving. That is how there is an origin of suffering. And from Anguttara Nikaya 3, Book of the Threes, Sutta 55. Inflamed by lust, incensed by hate, confused by delusion, transcended by them, and his mind overcome by them, and his mind obsessed, a man chooses for his own affliction, for others' affliction, and for the affliction of both, and experiences pain and grief. And from Majjhima Nikaya 135, beings are owners of actions, heirs of actions. They have action as their progenitor, action as their kin and responsibility, action as their home refuge. It is actions that differentiate beings into inferior and superior, and action is kamma there. What is old action? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind are old action, already determined and chosen, that must be experienced to be seen. What is new action, or new kamma? It is whatever action one does now, whether by body, speech, or mind. And another from Samyutta 12, this is Sutta 37. This body is not yours or another's, but is past action, already determined and chosen, that must be experienced and seen. And then this is from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Sixes, Sutta 63. It is choice that I call action, or it is intention that I call kamma. It is in intending that a man acts by body, speech, and mind. There are actions whose ripening will be experienced in hell, in the animal womb, in the realm of ghosts, among human beings, and in heavenly worlds. Actions ripen in 3 ways. They can ripen here and now, on reappearance, or in some lifetime beyond that. And this next one is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Threes, Sutta 33. Actions done out of lust or hate or delusion ripen wherever an individual selfhood is generated, and wherever those actions ripen, there their ripening is experienced, whether here or now, or on next reappearance, or some lifetime beyond that. For me, this is a profound one as well, because you get the idea of any kamma done with lust, hatred, or delusion, it has to wherever an individual selfhood is generated, so there has to be that ignorance and the sense of self for it to land on, and that's just quite profound, I think, in terms of the whole thinking about the whole path and the final stage, say the mind of an arhat, like, and I think of other teachings like even like Sixth Patriarch Sutta, where it's there's nowhere for it to alight. There's nowhere for the dust to alight. Originally, Bodhi has no stand. There's nowhere for the dust to alight. So that makes me think of those kind of teachings. This is from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Fours, Sutta 77. There are 4 incalculables which cannot be calculated. An attempt to calculate which would lead to frustration and madness. What for? They are the objective field of the Buddhas, the objective field of one who has acquired the meditations or the jhanas. So like I've seen that also translated as the possibilities of what's possible when one acquires the jhanas. The ripening of kama or of action, and the calculation of the world, or conceiving of the world, the whole world. The world is led by mind. That's the end of what Venerable Nyanmoli has to say on origin of suffering. Any questions or comments? And if this leads to some sort of discussion, we'll go into Lumpur Sumedho tomorrow, or if nobody has anything, then we'll go into it now.
So Ajahn, just to clarify, Ajahn Ñāṇiko, he's just kind of like weaving a lot of sutta passages together that kind of indicate how we should contemplate, or what was your kind of sense of his?
Yeah, it's like a collection of probably just different things that stuck out for him that he found on his reading of the Pali Suttas, things to translate that were relevant in terms of suffering, origin of suffering. And for him, it looks like the origin of suffering, he really dove into karma, like kama in action, and paticca samuppada, so it wasn't just, I think a lot of it is fleshing out these terms as well. Like I really like that sutta of the fleshing out of each term in paticca samuppada, and so that there's not as much doubt, about them. Of course, if anybody wanted to really go into it, there's many, many more suttas where the Buddha talks about contact and craving and desire leading to wars and conflicts, and things like that. Or there's the proximate cause in the Samyutta, in the Nidana Samyutta, the proximate cause sutta, which is also one of my favorites, which is the ignorance all the way up through suffering, but then suffering leading to faith, and then faith up all the way up through liberation. And so there's just some really, these gems all over in the suttas. Yes?
Is it correct to say that old karma cannot be attenuated by new karma?
I think that's a question for Lumpur. Old karma can be attenuated by new karma?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the path factors are new karma. So then that is an attenuation. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a possibility of liberation. So that's exactly what the cultivation of the path is, a cultivation of new karma. There's also aspects of using, replacing, rather than using dukkha, then using kamma. So that there is kamma, cause of kamma, cessation of kamma, path leading to cessation of kamma. So that's another formulation that the Buddha uses to because there are, there are various, even today, but certainly in the time of the Buddha, then there were conceptions of, say, spiritual life where the one, say, sense of hopelessness that there is no end to this, or that there is no actual way of doing it. It's only through fate or through divine intervention that it comes to an end. So then, but with the Buddhists, no, there is a path, there's a way of conducting oneself, practicing and training that leads to an end of karma.
So when you say that old karma cannot be exhausted, it can only be attenuated?
Well, I mean, it can be exhausted, but it's not a tit for tat sale. I mean, it's much more complicated, than say direct exchange, and because also a lot of it is the as one of the readings I was just talking about in terms of it has to have a place to land as well, in the sense of that conceiving of being is the basis for the landing of karma as well.
I think also like clarifying that the landing is the suffering.
Yeah.
So like I think of like Luang Por Cha with his illness, he apparently said it was from karma, but it wasn't landing in the sense of he wasn't suffering. He wasn't actually suffering. That for me, that's a very profound point.
I mean, it's a way out of the whole samsara predicament.
Also, the simile of the love of salt.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great reminder of the way that karma attenuates. Depends on, if you have a lot of good karma and only a tiny bit of bad karma, then it's going to affect in a different way than say a lot of bad karma and you put a bit more in. That's a bit more. It just is that simile of the lump of salt, whether it's in a handful of salt in a glass of water, or a handful of salt in the river Ganges, it has a very different effect.
Tanjoti-manto.
In response to Dave's point, or Dave's question, the metaphor that comes to my mind is the simile of the field, like planting seeds and watering them. Would it be accurate to say that past actions are like seeds that have been planted, and that because craving is usually described as the moisture that waters the seeds. So would it be accurate to say that past actions would be like the seeds that are planted, and that if there's no craving or no moisture, then those seeds can't ripen?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good illustration or use of that simile. Apt. Sometimes similes are never 100% perfect, but that's a good application of that.
I'm wondering, does the section in the Anapanasati Sutta and Chitta Sankhara, does that connect with this somehow? Experiencing mental formations, tranquilizing mental formations,
understanding this process, because citta sankhara are defined in the suttas as feeling and perception. So that is what is building the process of the mind conditioning, the conditioning process of the mind, which then this is pointing to that, but then you can't separate it out. So you've got the whole package of mind, the whole package of nama-rupa, and so then it's one's actually learning that process just on a breath-to-breath basis, and which is you can get a handle on at least one breath, or at least half a breath. So then you can use it as a tool for reflection, investigation, understanding how this formation process works, and how one can be affecting it, in that one can be, you can be stirring it up, or you can be settling it down, you can be calming the citta sankhara.
One more. Just one question about the karma and the way that new karma can affect old karma. Would it be accurate to say that, we're meditating, the thoughts that are arising, those are the results of past karma, and say how we relate to them, how we, whether it's attachment or aversion, what we do with them, how we react to them, that's the new karma, and that's the way the new karma can either sort of dissolve the past karma or perpetuate it, or is it that simple, or what would you say to that?
Of course, it's helpful to simplify things sometimes rather than making it more complicated. But that is a useful way of reflecting and recognizing that this is where one does have agency, and that one can. And this is also the the efficacy of skillful action. It has an effect on the mind, and one can start to recognize that and gain confidence in that process. And it feels different than, say, when one does settle the mind rather than when it's stirred up. So then that's one's gaining skill and gaining confidence in that process.
Through meditation and cultivation.
Through that cultivation, through that meditation.
So is in contemplating the citta sankhara, could that be like considering how one's mode of attention or one's thinking is affecting feeling and perception, or vice versa?
It's all there together.
It's conjoined, not disjoint.
It's conjoined, it's not disjoint.
I'm thinking of, I think it's Queen Malika, described by Bhikkhu Bodhi in Great Disciples. He says she has to spend a week in hell because of an evil act she committed. And I think it's King Vicinity goes to ask the Buddha where she is, and he doesn't tell him for a week.
Yes.
So, is her karma not sufficiently good to attenuate that act?
No, I think that Dhammapada commentaries are not sufficient.
It could be one of those things to wake up sleepy students in the back of the room or something.
Some of those stories are really, they're illustrating the point that that last mind moment is really critical. And but there's a very beautiful sutta of King Mahanama being kind of worried and concerned, and saying, gosh, it's hard to keep mindfulness all the time, and I ride through Kapilavatthu, the capital city, and there's elephants and there's carts and there's what would happen if something came out and just squashed me and I died, that mind moment, that mind is not in a great state at that time. And the Buddha sort of do not worry about that. It's sort of like the impetus of the good that one has done is what comes to the fore. I mean, would work the other way as well, but the Buddha is focusing on the good. But he gives the illustration of putting ghee or oil into a clay vessel, and then it dropping in the water and going down to the bottom, hitting the rock. The vessel shatters